Hello everyone, I am Ayush Srivastav from Paraguide Technology, and today we are going to create a Todo application using React.js and Redux architecture. So let's begin. I've created a folder on my desktop. I have named this folder React application. I'm going to go inside this folder and I'm going to click on this address bar. I'm going to type cmd. So this will open command prompt on this folder's path. I'm going to use create React app utility to create this application. So I'm going to type create React app and I'm going to name this app Todo app. I'll press enter. So this will install all the Node.js dependencies and the React dependencies in this folder. This will take some while, so we'll be back once this is done. So now as you can see, create React app utility has created a Todo application. What I'm going to do, I'm going to open this app in editor. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code for editing this application, and you can use any editor of your choice. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create components for my application. So let's create some components for our application. Here you can see these are the components for our Todo application. We have a header component, we have a taskbar component, we have a task list component, and one more component we are going to need is task for this task list component. So we are going to create them. So inside this src folder, I'm going to create a folder. I'll name this folder components. Inside this components folder, I'm going to create a header folder, and inside this header folder, I'm going to create a file index.js. So let's begin with the coding. I'm going to import React from React, and I'm going to create a class. I'll name this class header. This will extend from React.component, and this class is going to have a render method. I'm not going to use this component here, so I'm going to export this component. And this render method is going to return me a heading. That will be our Todo application. So this header component is done. I'm going to create another component inside this component folder. So I'm going to create taskbar, and again I'm going to create index.js. I'm going to import React from React. Again I'm going to export this class. So export default class taskbar extends React.component. This class is going to have a render method which is going to return me a div. Inside this div will have input type text, and I'm going to give a reference to it. I'll name the reference as task and a placeholder. Add your tasks here, and I'll add a button. Name this button add task, semicolon. So I have completed with this taskbar component. I am going to create task list component now. So inside this component again I am going to create a folder task list. inside this task list folder I'm going to create a file index.js, and again I'm going to import React from React, export this class, extend React.component. Again this class is going to have a render method. This class is going to return me a table. I'm going to use t-head inside this table and a t-body. We are going to leave this t-body section for as of now. We are not going to code inside this t-body section. Inside this t-head section we are going to create a row, and inside this row we are going to add headings. I'll name action, and next heading, rather I'll need this up over here before actions. I'll name this tasks. So we have created 3 components, and now what I am going to do, I am going to this app.js. So this is some code provided by default by create React app utility. I am going to delete this. I am not going to need these imports as well. What I am going to do, I am going to import a component that we have just created in this file. So import header from components, header. Then I'm going to import taskbar from components, taskbar. Then I'm going to import task list, so now we need a parent component or a parent container which is going to render child components. So inside this div we are going to have header, taskbar, task list. So let's run this application quickly. So we were here. I'm going to go inside our to-do folder, and let me quickly check. Yes, we are inside. Now I'm going to use npm start command to start our dev server. This will run our application. Hopefully, if everything is alright, let's run. So now you can see our components are working, and you can see our header, taskbar and table is created properly. So now what we are going to do, we are going to write actions for these components. So I'm going to create another folder in this src folder. I'll name this folder actions, and inside this folder I'm going to create index.js file, and I'm going to write our actions. Export constant add task. This function will take a task, and this will return an object. What this object will contain is a type. You can name it, and a payload. So as of now I'm going to define payload as task, and type I'm going to name add underscore task, and we are going to need another action, so that will be our delete task. This function is going to take a task ID and it is going to return us an object having type. So I'm going to name this type as delete task, and payload as task ID. So what is an action? Action is actually an object which is containing a type and a payload. So payload is the value of that action and type is the name of that action. We are going to use it in our application. So as of now, just understand that an action is a object which is containing a type and a payload. Payload is the value of that action and type is the name of that action. I'll rather use exports in another fashion. I can also export these variables as export default like we were doing in our previous sections, like add task, and I'm going to use delete task. So this is another way of writing exporting rather our functions or our objects from ES6 module. So this is it for the actions, and now we are going to create reducers. So reducers are the decision makers that take the decision on every action what needs to be done. This is the work of reducer. They do task based on the action that has been triggered. So we are going to create a reducers folder inside this src folder, and I'm going to add index.js inside this folder. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to import combine reducers from Redux. So I've imported combine reducers from Redux, and I'm going to create a reducer, and I'm going to name this reducer as task reducer. So this will be a function that will take a state and an action. By default, I'm going to provide a default value to this state, and that will be empty state, and this will be a function. So arrow and curly braces. I'm going to use switch statement, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to type action dot type. So as I told you, action is having two things, a type and a payload. So we are going to conditionally use type of actions in this component. So I'll write two cases for this. Case add task break, and case delete task and break to stop the flow of this switch statement. And this reducer function is going to return me a state. So inside this add task, I'm going to modify this state based on the action that has been triggered. So as you can see, add action will trigger or add an action to our state, and delete task will remove a task from our state. So add task state equals to state dot concat action dot payload. Why I'm using payload is because this payload contains the data that has been passed to this action. So here we can see actions has two type, add task and delete task, and have two different payloads, task and task ID. So inside this reducers, then we are going to write a state change for this delete task action. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy state. So I use slice function to copy our array in the state, and then I'm going to remove the task which has been deleted from the array using the splice method. So our reducer file has been complete. Right now we are using a single reducer. We can have multiple reducer, but we are going to show you how multiple reducers can be added in our application. So I'm using combined reducers in this JS file or in this video tutorial. So we are going to type reducers we can have a comma over here instead of the semicolon, and this reducers object will have combine reducers. This will again have an object task, and this will have task reducer. I'm going to export this reducers object. So now this completes our reducers. Now we'll bind these components that we have created with this actions and reducers. So for binding these components, I'm going inside this index.js file, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to import provider from React, Redux, and I'm going to import create a store from Redux. I'll remove this index.css file. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create a store, and for creating the stores we are going to need reducers. So I'm going to import them as well. So I'm going to use this create store line to pass reducers to this store. So this function is going to return me a store. I'm going to store that reference in a variable of type store. Then this is our app, and to provide this app or a store, we need to connect this store with this app, and to connect this app and store we'll be needing this provider. So we are going to provide this provider to this app, and we are going to connect this provider with a store, and inside this provider we are going to render our app So any component inside this provider or any component inside this app in hierarchy will be receiving this store as a prop. We'll be seeing this later on, but for now you can take it as this store will be connected with this app using this provider. So let's go to our component and let's go to taskbar component and do the remaining work that we need over here. So as you can see, we have created a button, we have created a input type. Now we need to add some dynamic things, or we need to do some dynamic things when this button is pressed. So we are going to import connect from React Redux, and I'm going to import bind action creator from Redux, and I'm going to import our action that was add task from our actions folder. Now we don't need to export this class anymore. So I'm going to remove these two keywords and put a semicolon over here, and I'll export connect, and I'll pass two functions to this function and taskbar as another parameter to this connect function, and I'm going to export this. So what are these two parameters of this function connect? So these two parameters are a dispatcher and a props binding function to this component, that is taskbar. So we don't need to bind any props to the state of this component. So I'm going to leave this function as a blank because we won't be needing any state over in this component. All we are going to need is a dispatcher. So I'm going to create a function over here that will be map dispatch to props, and this will have a dispatch argument, and this is going to return me a bind action creator, and we are going to pass add task action, or ES6 syntax we can write this as like this, and we can use this dispatch inside this as a second parameter. So this add task will be binded to the state of this taskbar as we are connecting these two things, and I'm going to pass this to the second parameter of this connect function, and as we are going to get this in props of this function. So this dot props dot add task, and I need to pass this function a value. Value. So whenever this button is pressed, this will take the value of this input and it pass it to the add task action, and here we have defined add task action that will take a task, and this will return us an object that will contain the payload, right? So this will pass on to this store, and this store is bind with the reducers. So task reducers will be called, and action which is written by this actions, and type of that action will be add task, so our state will get changed. This is how this is going to work. So our taskbar component is complete. Now we need to go to the task list component, that is here. So now let's create some dynamic components, and I'm going to import connect from React, Redux, and inside this t-body will be rendering each task. So we'll be binding first this with the connect function. So I'm exporting default of connect function, and we are going to need the state to props function. This function I'm going to create. We have created this function in this, or rather in our taskbar component we have created this function, but we don't want to map any state with the props, so we left it blank. But here we need, as we are going to need our task to be rendered in our list, so we are going to define this function and this task list. So export default won't be needed over here now, and I'm going to create a function map state to props. So this will get state from the store, and it will return us a task state from the task. So we have created this in reducers. We have created a state that will be populated by this add task action, and task will be removed from the delete task action, and this state will be bind with the components task list. So now this task list is going to get task as a prop. So here this dot props dot task, and it's an array, so we are going to use map. We are going to get task, and we are going to get index. There's a function, so we'll render a component. We'll name this task, and we'll pass a prop that will be task over here. So we have mapped tasks, so this prop task is going to map iterate on this task, and we will render a component task that we are going to create now. I have told you earlier that our list will contain a component called task that will be repeatedly iterated and is going to be used inside the task list. So now let's create our task component. I'm going to create a folder. I'll name it task. Inside this folder I'm going to create index.js file. So I'm going to import React from React, and let's create the component first. I'm going to create component task extends react.component. This will have a render method, which will return me a table row. This table row will contain a table div, and here we are going to populate this.pop.task. So in the first section we are going to have a task. In the second section, in the action section, we are going to have an action button. So I'm going to create a button over here, and this will have delete action. So whenever a task is complete, we can delete this task, and we'll use this button to delete that task. So now we have to bind this task component with our store. So we'll be binding it. So I'll export default connect, and we'll define a blank function because we are not going to need this. This function will be returning nothing, so we can write it like this. And again we'll have a map dispatch to props. So this will bind a dispatcher with our props, and we are going to pass task. It's another option. So I'm going to create this function again. I'm going to write function dispatch props dispatcher. Rather, I'll use dispatch over here, and let's create this function. This will be returning us a bind action creator, and we'll be passing our delete action, or delete task was the name of that action. I'm going to check in this file. It was delete task, so I'm going to pass delete task, and a dispatch parameter to this function. We need to import this connect and this bind action creator. So I'm going to import this bind action creator from Redux, and I'm going to import this delete task from our actions folder. So we'll be going to this actions. Yeah, we need to import this connect also, so I'm going to import this connect from React Redux. These libraries we haven't installed. We need to install these libraries in a folder, so we'll install them later. We have to just use npm I and name of these libraries. We can use npm installer. Anyways, we will install them later. So now we have added a dispatcher. We need to bind this delete task on click action of this button. So I'm going to define on click event of this button, and this function .id. So on click of this button, we are going to delete this task. So on click of this button, we are going to delete this task. I'm going to pass ID of this task to delete task action. This function needs to return a blank object as it is mapped with the props of this component. This will be creators. Everything is fine in this component. So now what we are going to do, we are going to install the Redux and React Redux dependencies in our package. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to npm install React Redux. I'll press enter. This will start installation of React Redux library from npm libraries. We'll cut this off as it is going to take some time. So now React Redux is installed. We are going to install another library, that will be our Redux library. So I'm going to type npm install enter, and this will install Redux. So I'm going to cut it off again as it will install Redux. So now our Redux library is installed. What we are going to do, we are going to start our application using npm start command. This will start the dev server. We have to wait for a while. So now you can see development server is started. So you can see our to-do application. Let's quickly add a task in our list. So I'll add task 1. I'll press add task. So this task is added in a task list. I'm going to add another task, task 2. And similarly, we can delete these tasks from the list. Hope this tutorial helped you in creating a to-do list. Thank you.